All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to see such an interest in the Capital Fellows programs. Thank you for joining us. This session will be recorded. I just pressed the record button. If you can agree to record so we can continue with the presentation. Welcome, everybody. We'll just wait a little bit more. We're waiting for all of our panel to be here with us so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you again for your interest in the Capital Fellows programs. This is the Capital Fellows Alum Information Session, where we will be talking about the day in the life of a fellow. All right, here we go. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and share our screen so we can look at our slides for this presentation. With us, we'll have today our Executive Director, Leonora Alum, and
Hi.
we'll have alums from the Assembly Fellowship Program, Executive Fellowship Program, Judicial, and Senate.
Can I just remind everyone to please mute themselves so everyone can hear? Thank you. Sorry about that, Nadia.
No worries. I'll go ahead and start sharing. So we're here to talk about the Capital Fellows programs. The Capital Fellows programs, it's a gateway to public service and leadership in the state of California. We have many different programs to offer. And let's see. Here you can see the different activities that Capital Fellows get to do throughout the year. It's a unique program, and it offers you an opportunity to participate in policy making in the state of California. Let's see. The fellows get to work about 10 to 11 months, and you get to work as a full-time staff member for the California government. It could be in the Assembly area with the Assembly Fellows, Senate with the California Senate Fellows, the Executive Branch with the California Executive Fellows, and the Judicial Branch with the Judicial Fellows. You get to participate and engage in public service, and you get to prepare for future careers while you gain firsthand experience in governance and leadership in the most diverse and complex state in the nation. So with the Capital Fellows programs, you get to open many doors to your future career. Let's go and sit in CD. We have minimum qualifications for the Capital Fellows programs. A bachelor's degree in any major with an accumulated GPA of 2.5 units in 60 semester units or 90 quarter units. You have to have a demonstrated interest in state government and public service, be 20 years of age by September 1st of the fellowship year. And for non-US citizens, as long as you have a visa and you're eligible to work, you can go ahead and apply for the programs. Unfortunately, we do not meet the requirements to cover the F1 or J1 visas. So the benefits of being a Capital Fellows is that you get $3,253 a month, and that's a monthly salary. You get 6 graduate units from Sacramento State in political science or public policy, and a graduate certificate in applied policy and government. And that's whenever you complete the fellowship. We also offer health, vision, and dental benefits, as well as loan deferments and a bus pass for the Sacramento region. All right, so let's see here. We have some fast facts about the Capital Fellows programs. The fellows will be adding more information about this. You get to participate in an academic seminar, and this academic seminar is taught by a Sac State faculty. In this seminar, you get to discuss topics and explore different things like the budget, civil service, executive leadership, and the relationship of the government institutions to the society they serve. You meet with your cohort fellows and you discuss and analyze, also review current events or trends in the state of California. There's also guest speakers that you get to interact with via brown bag meetings during lunchtime. So you get to learn a lot about these guest speakers that you interact with. The Capital Fellows programs are mainly located in Sacramento, with the exception of the Judicial Fellowship program. The Judicial Fellowship program has placements throughout the state of California. So here we go. Who can apply for the Capital Fellows programs? Well, any individual that meets our requirements can apply to one or more programs that meets their interests and qualifications. We have fellows from all economic, cultural, and career backgrounds, and there's no previous political experience required for the fellowship. We accept recent graduates, postgraduates, and mid-career applicants. You're all welcome to apply. With the Capital Fellows programs, we have applicants with any party affiliation. It could be Republican, Democrat, be affiliated with a third party or no party at all. We encourage everyone to apply as long as you meet the minimum qualifications. The timeline for the Capital Fellows, our applications start in the month of October. Early to mid-October, that's when our applications open. The application period is from October to February. February 6th is the deadline for this upcoming cohort. It's by 5 p.m. PST time. From February to April, it's the review time of the applications. And late April, early May, it's when the interviews are conducted. In May, applicants get notified of their status, if they were accepted or not. And the fellowship starts in September or October, depending on the fellowship that you will be participating in. Judicial Fellowship starts in September. Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Cassandra, our Assembly alum, so she can talk a little bit more about the Assembly Fellowship program.
Yes, hi, thank you. It's nice to be here today. My name is Cassandra Marr. I am Assembly Fellow last year, 2021, 2022. I was Assembly Fellow in Assembly Member Jackie Irwin's office, and I'm very fortunate to be staying on. So I just finished my first full week of being transitioning to a full legate with Assembly Member Irwin. A little bit about the background of the fellowship. There is 18 Assembly Fellows that are chosen, and out of those Assembly Fellows, there's a larger number of Democratic Fellows and then Republican Fellows as well.
Sorry about that.
Would it be helpful Nadia, would it be helpful like for a little bit more background, just like my own general experience or anything like the interview would?
Dragon Ball already in the system. Okay.
Nadia, you're muted.
Yes, as I was muted, if I can remind everyone to please mute your microphone so we can go ahead and continue with the presentation. Cassandra, thank you for that question. Yes, please, if you can give a little bit about the background, what a day in the life of a fellow, how it was for you, a little bit about placement as well. How was the placement for the Assembly Fellowship program?
Yeah, I can start with, thank you. I can start with placement. So essentially after we did our orientation, we have, depending on how many assembly members have an application that they would like to have a fellow, then we're given like a shared file with all the members who applied for a fellow, and you get to see a little bit of background for each member. So you can do your own research and see what kind of interests you. I think something that was helpful for me is I really did like a list of what do I want out of the fellowship? Like, there's a lot of professional growth, obviously, but also personally where I would be challenged the most to think outside of the work that I've already done, but use those skills that I learned and kind of think a little bit outside the box and do something different. And I'm from Sacramento. And as I was looking through that list, Assemblymember Irwin's office stood out a lot to me because of the opportunity to be in a completely different district, She's a little bit, not yet LA County, but a little bit more south part of the state. Also the diversity, and she's a purple district. She flipped the seat from Republican seat to a Democratic seat. So a lot of the work that we're doing is really bipartisan work and looking at both sides of an issue and really digging deep, because you have a lot of people in her community that lean red and a lot of people that lean obviously blue Democratic. And I really thought that was an opportunity for me to challenge myself and see both sides of an argument and be able to present both sides every time we have to brief her on things. So fortunate enough to be in Assemblymember Irwin's office for my fellowship year. A day in the life is very kind of switches back and forth things. We have our moments where we're super busy and where we're kind of like working from very early on and we don't really have those breaks, but it's like a good busy. Mostly what I consisted of is I had my issue areas that I was interested in. I staffed her. She sits on higher education and on business and professions committee, among other committees. And I staffed her on those two committees a lot. And what that meant was I would look at the bills that were coming in on the committees and give her vote recommendations based on our district, based on her previous vote pattern, based on certain red flags that we're seeing. Also, on the opposite side, if I was urging her, like, this is very important, I think we really need to speak on it. And you need to go in committee and say something about positively about why the bill will impact Californians in a good way. And that would be a lot of the work that I was doing to inform her of vote recos that were coming in committee and then later on in the floor. Besides from that, also your bill package that you have. And I have 6 bills this legislative session. So working them from start to finish, and that means your legislative fact sheet, what this bill does, speaking with committee members, speaking with stakeholders in the process and telling them like, hey, this is what we're working on and this is what we're doing. I wouldn't do a lot of, I saw a comment that said, would you make presentations? I wouldn't do a lot of presentations. There's a lot of writing and like researching that goes into the program. So that's when you do your fact sheets. That's when you do the briefings for the member. And that's when you do all of that. And then it really depends on the season, like when you're heavy in committee season, it's a lot of vote recos, like I mentioned, and like getting them prepared for the floor and for committees. And it flips back and forth between the day, but it's really a great opportunity for you to like see into the mind of the district and into the mind of your member and see why they vote a certain way and see how you can like align certain things to match their views or also challenge what they're already thinking and see how you can shape policy. So it's been a really great experience. I know that was like a lot to throw out there. I think there's a lot that we did in the past like year, but really you're going to be drinking out of a fire. Don't they say like out of a fire hose, because it's just so much information that's going out to you, but you have a strong support system within your own fellows, within your professor, within your program director. So I think there's a sense of comfort that I had with that like, yes, everything's changing. Yes, everything's scary and new. And like, it's so many big things that you're doing, but because you're so supported by your own team, by your own member, by your own like chief LD, but then beyond that, by your fellows, by your professor, by your program director, there's a sense of like stability in the middle of the chaos that happens in the legislative process and session.
Beautiful. Thank you. I like how you put that. There's a sense of stability in the middle of the chaos because you have a network that you can rely on, correct? A follow-up question is, what was your favorite thing about the fellowship?
I think this depends on member to member, kind of the flexibility that they provide you and the autonomy that they provide you. But I was very fortunate that my team is very like go-getter and like they have a lot of trust in you and they give you a lot of autonomy over your own work. So a lot of times I feel like, especially because I'm new to the process at the beginning of the year, so many things were like, I want to try this, I want to try that, I want to look into this. She chairs Assembly Committee on Revenue and Taxation, which is like a whole world in its own to be thinking about like what exactly is tax law and everything. But I really wanted to do work on earned income tax credit in the state of California. And I really pushed and I was like, hey, we should look into this. And we were able to run a bill this year that's at the governor's desk on that. And now we're doing an oversight hearing where we're going to dig deep into EITC and see why it's not reaching as many people as it should be and how to like bring more people into this, especially because it's low income and middle income families and workers that qualify for this credit. And I think that's been one of the most exciting parts, to see something from the beginning and seeing her start her chairmanship at the Rev and Tax Committee and what we really want to prioritize and what we can do. And I think that's been my favorite part, to just see something from the very, very beginning all the way until right now, and know that there's so much more to do in that area, but just laying those initial like steps and groundwork has been really, really like gratifying so far. And just like knowing that my team has that trust in me to like lead this, but also me knowing that I have that trust in them, that when I make my mistakes and then when I'm really confused and overwhelmed, I can go to them and be like, hey, what's next? Like, I think this might be it, but I'm not sure. And that they're able to guide me and be there in those times.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Let's see. So let's go ahead and continue with the next fellowship. So just one little thing about the Assembly Fellowship Program is you get to choose from 80 different Assembly members while you're looking through the placement. So the next fellowship is the California Senate Fellows Program. And we have Senate Fellows Director, Jamie. He'll be talking a little bit about the California Senate Fellows Program.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia, and thanks to everyone who has taken time to ask questions and show up today. We really appreciate your interest in public service and in the 3 branches of government. So definitely recommend that you really look into the differences between the programs and get a sense for what you would feel comfortable with. I have always found that folks who are really interested in the creation of law should really consider, and not to say that you aren't recommending the creation of law in any other agency or department or branch of government, but you'll really be more hands-on in thinking about changing the world and being a generalist in the form of the creation of legislation in both the Senate and the Assembly. And so there are some differences between the houses. Of course, the Senate is considered the upper house, but it is a smaller house. So there are 40 members. And we typically have about, on average, 30 members, 30 offices, and that includes Senate member offices and committee offices that request a fellow. It is a distinguished program. It is hands-on. You go from basic discovery to active participation and delivering on the public contract for California. So you do a lot of research and policy development. You learn stakeholder development, outreach, communications. You learn how to negotiate in a lot of ways. And you become really a full-time ledge aide in a sense, but you are considered a fellow. So we pour heavily into you with the idea that you will have the tools to be effective in this particular branch of government should you decide to stay post-fellowship. So we really rally behind the fellows. They have what is called a fellows card, so to speak, and a lot of doors open with that, and people embrace them and support them and pour into them as well. And then the hope is that, again, you stick around in the legislature if you're interested, and there are opportunities post-fellowship, and we really work hard with the main partner in the Senate, which is the Secretary of the Senate and Senate leadership, to make sure that we can, continue to grow the talent base for the employees within the Senate post-fellowship. So definitely a lot of opportunity within the program to learn, be poured into, supported throughout this process, this 1 year of process of getting the hands-on experience, and then post-fellowship staying on and having the opportunity to continue your growth in a very, very interesting and just challenging environment. So,
Thank you so much, Jamie. And Kai is our alum for the Senate Fellows Program. Kai, if you can share a little bit about your experience during the fellowship, please.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Kai Cooper. I come from Northern California, up in Arcata, up on the North Coast. I graduated from Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly Humboldt, with a degree in political science, focusing on environment and sustainability. I really applied to this program because of its hands-on learning component. I really was involved in my Center for Community-Based Learning on campus, and therefore, wanted a program that I was able to really immerse myself into, and that's exactly what this program does. I love the environment. I love being from a small rural community, and so I really wanted to advocate on behalf of that. I did Model UN in college, which was part of the reason why I got interested in public service in the first place. I actually didn't know that this program existed until I found a loan brochure somewhere out on the table. So kind of cosmic that I found this program, but overall, it's been a really great experience, and I'm very grateful that I was able to be a part of it. To kind of go into a typical day in a fellowship program, you're treated like a legate, as Jamie was saying. You are trusted staff. You have responsibilities, as Cassandra's saying. You're briefing members on their committees. You're briefing members on what's happening with their bills. So depending on what stage you're at in the legislative cycle, you are going to be vetting bill ideas with committees. Once those bills are introduced, you're going to be following them throughout the legislative cycle, making sure that all of your ducks are in a row, essentially. You've got your testimony lined up, you've got your fact sheets done. You'll hold meetings with stakeholders and, do some vote counts. You're very immersed in the legislative cycle. And, I tracked bills, I staffed transportation committee. You also have a mentor who is there to support you throughout the entire program. My legislative director was a great support system for me. And that's another person that you really want to go look out for when you're interviewing for offices, is making sure that that mentor is going to align with you and your work style and their mentorship style. So yeah, just look out for that. I think you really have to be aware of knowing both sides of the coin, as Cassandra was saying. Support and opposition is really important. I was able to staff a bill that had a lot of different perspectives and a lot of disagreement, and my boss would call it threading the needle of trying to find that compromise. So that's a lot of what you're going to be doing. I was surprised most of all by how closely I was a part of the legislative cycle. You're really there communicating on behalf of your bills and on behalf of your member. You are representative of what your member wants. It is your member's bill. It's not your bill, and you're working on behalf of that person. So I was fortunate enough to be placed with Senator Mike McGuire's office. He actually represents the North Coast, and he's the Senate Majority Leader. So his district spans from Marin up to Del Norte, so encompassed my hometown and where I grew up. So I was really grateful to be a part of that, and that actually helped shape where I went with my career. The fellowship kind of gave me a bigger perspective of what's happening at the state level, and made me realize that I wanted to go into more of a local level of government, just because I like being in the community and with the people. And so, having that experience in the legislature, I brought that knowledge back to the district, and now I'm able to know what's happening on the bigger stage, but then communicate that to the communities down here in the North Coast. So I was fortunate enough to accept a position as a district representative for Senator McGuire. So now I work in Sonoma County area for the senator, staff his meetings, I go to him to functions, so on behalf of him to functions, and I'm kind of that point of contact. So it was a really cool experience overall, being a fellow. And my favorite thing was probably, my cohort. I really felt like you have a group of 18 people that you're able to enter this program with and support each other, what you're going through. And, a lot of us moved from out of the Sacramento area. I wasn't familiar with Sacramento at the time, but you have a group, it's almost like an instant group of friends that you're able to, lean on and learn the area together. And yeah, just touching on the seminar a little bit too, that was a great element of the program. You're able to kind of debrief that first half of the fellowship with your cohort on different issue areas. It's not as partisan as you really would think it would be. You really kind of all come together and try to find that compromise and that common ground together. So yeah, and then brown bags, another great element. You're able to meet with senators and other important staff in the legislature and learn a little bit about their job. as Jamie said, there's this fellow card. It is really valuable. You're able to utilize that and say, hi, I'm a fellow, I want to learn, and people will help you. And so overall, the Capital community is a great space to be in. So yeah.
Thank you
Pass it
so
back
much,
to you,
Kai.
Nadia.
No, that was perfect. Just a quick question in regards to bills. What did the workload look like?
Yeah, so to elaborate on the workload, as Cassandra was saying, it kind of ebbs and flows depending on what part of the legislative cycle you're in. So, end of session, House of Origin deadlines, the building runs on deadlines, and you're really going to have to be aware of that, making sure that you're planning a week out, a month out, making sure that your, bills are ready to go essentially, and that you're ready for that next step in the cycle. You're ready for that next deadline. And so just to answer your question, workload kind of varies on what point of the cycle you're at.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so this. Okay, and there's 18, and you get to work with the senators, and the placement is between 40 senators that you get to choose from. So our next fellowship is the Judicial Fellowship Program. For the Judicial Fellowship Program, we have Lindsay. Lindsay will be talking about her experience in the Judicial Fellowship Program.
Hi, thanks, Nadia. Nadia, would you mind going to the next slide? Because I think I'll start by talking about some of the unique aspects.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So the Judicial Fellowship Program is the most different from the other three, mostly just in the fact that the placements are across the state. So we have fellows in Southern California, Northern California, Sacramento area, even above north of the Sacramento area in the different courthouses. We are also a smaller class. We have 10 fellows accepted each fellowship year, and there's typically one fellow in each placement, and those placements depend every single year. There's different courts and offices in the Judicial Council that fellows are a part of. So my personal placement was in the Judicial Council of California, which, if you don't know what that is, that's okay. I didn't either until I applied. It's the statewide policy-making body for the courts. And if you didn't know, the courts have policy, another thing that you learn lots about in the Judicial Fellowship. Within the Judicial Council, I was placed in the Criminal Justice Services Office. So I worked on a lot of the kind of big criminal justice priorities of the state, like pretrial reform, fine and fee reform, access to courts, accessibility issues for self-represented litigants, just a variety of issues in the criminal justice and traffic areas. And I was placed in San Francisco. That's where the Judicial Council is based. And usually each fellowship class has 1 to 2 fellows in the Judicial Council offices, and the majority of fellows are placed in courthouses. And I think that is a really special part of the Judicial Fellowship, because when we came together in seminar, I felt like myself and the other fellow who was placed in the Judicial Council got a lot out of hearing from the courthouse fellows who had that on the ground perspective, and then they could hear from our perspective in the statewide body. So that's a little bit of background about the Judicial Fellows. Also, just to note, unlike the Senate and Assembly, and I believe Executive Fellows, with the Judicial Fellowship, when you get an offer to be part of the program, you're offered a spot in the class as well as your placement. So you don't have an interview process for picking your placement. That happens when you're accepted into the program. So you're offered that kind of as a package. And there's like a ranking and kind of preference process you go through during the interviews to indicate where in the state or what kinds of offices you might want to be part of. So in terms of my background, I am from California, from the suburbs in the Bay Area, but I studied at Washington University in St. Louis, educational studies major with a legal studies minor, and really was interested in this fellowship for a couple of reasons. One of the big draws for me was the cohort and graduate seminar aspect of the program. I really liked the idea of I was coming straight from undergrad and really liked the idea of having a support system in my first kind of full-time professional adult experience, and having people I could lean on and ask questions. And like Kai said, playing that fellow card, being like, I need help, I need, I want to sit in on this meeting, and just getting a lot of that exposure is really valuable. And I felt like it was a good transitional year for me. I also am interested in criminal justice, interested in the law in a kind of institutional sense. I think there's sometimes a misconception that the Judicial Fellowship is like a legal program, and it's not. It is a court administration program, which basically means you're working on everything that happens in a court other than the trials. There are some fellows who have more direct work with trials and things like collaborative courts and mental health courts and things like that. But for the most part, you're working kind of on the behind the scenes of courts, which was an issue area I felt like would be super fascinating as I was figuring out what criminal justice meant and where I wanted to be in that system and whether or not law school was the right path for me. My typical day, again, depended. Most of the time there was meetings, mentor check-ins. So my mentor, I had 2 different mentors and they would check in with me. I would check in with other members of my office who I worked with on a regular basis. We'd have meetings with kind of project-based meetings about what we were working on and what next steps needed to happen. And those were not only with members of the Criminal Justice Services Office, but also other members of the other Judicial Council staff members, with stakeholders, with representatives from executive agency departments, or representatives from, some of the fellows worked closer with the legislature, just a total variety depending on the projects that you're working on. There was a lot of independent work. The Judicial Fellow each takes on a fellowship project where they kind of take on something that's there, they own the project, they see it from beginning to end, and you usually get a lot of freedom in deciding what that was going to be. So for my project, was interviewing courts from across the state, interviewing judicial officers and court staff and probation departments, and kind of doing a program evaluation and coming up with some resources for my office to use going forward. So the days really depended, especially depending on what court you're in. Some fellows were placed full-time in person. My placement was majority remote, so I was only going in once a week, so that totally depended as well. I think what surprised me the most about the fellowship was just how much exposure I got to these statewide issues. Like I said, I didn't have a strong background of what the Judicial Council was, or what court administration meant, or what court policy looked like. So I think I just was exposed to a whole new field and a whole new sector of where a lot of things that affect the public get done with very little public awareness. And so I think that was super interesting to just think about as I'm early in my career and thinking about where I want to be in that system. My favorite thing, I think, was also the cohort and the people more generally. The Judicial Council staff are fantastic and have been such great mentors. Like the previous 2 presenters, I am also staying on with my office. I've been an associate analyst with Criminal Justice Services Office for about a month now since the fellowship ended, and have just been really grateful for the guidance of the people in my office and the people beyond my office who I email and ask questions, and kind of just figuring out, people are really willing to help fellows out. And the cohort support system model is fantastic, especially being only 10 of us. And even though we were across the state, we were always in our group chat, always like leaning on each other for seminar homework assignments, and even still staying in touch after the end of the fellowship as well. So I really appreciated that. And I appreciated the seminar experience, especially field seminars. We got to have a couple of in-person field seminars, and those were super transformative. And just thinking about, we got to observe a DUI court. We got to kind of have a tour of one of the county correctional facilities, and just those experiences, and having those lunches and speaker series with people across the judicial branch and people who interact with the judicial branch was super valuable. And then in terms of how it affected my career goals, obviously I stayed on. So I, see a lot of value in the Judicial Council and the work that it does, learned about a whole new field, and it's definitely going to be something I think about kind of moving forward as I think about law school and think about what I want to do after that. Definitely is a whole field that I don't think a lot of people know about, and I think is something I'm really grateful I have awareness of moving forward.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Can you touch a little bit more on the field seminars with the Judicial Fellowship program? For the seminars, you have to travel to them. So how does that work? Yeah, so our year was hopefully unique. I don't know what it will look like in the future, but majority of our field seminars were remote because we were still kind of half in the pre-pandemic or post-pandemic world. I don't know where we are today, but I know before the pandemic, every single month, basically the Judicial Fellows would meet in a different city across California. Many of the time Sacramento, could be LA County, Orange County, San Francisco, and they would get an immersive experience
in whatever the field seminar topic was that month. They would get a tour of the courthouse from the fellow that was placed there, which is exciting to get to show your classmates your workspace. And you would learn a lot about one of many topics. So when we did things remote, it was a similar structure. We just had people come to us online instead of going to them. So we would have members of the Office of Governmental Affairs from the Judicial Council who would talk to us about why certain legislative priorities, what legislative priorities the Judicial Council takes on. We had a meeting with the Chief Justice of the Yurok tribe, which was a super amazing experience that we wouldn't have been able to do in person since it would be too far to travel all the way up north. I know they used to have a visit to San Quentin Prison, which I'm super bummed we didn't get to do, but we did have some really amazing speakers thinking about what imprisonment looks like and what programs the courts have to facilitate reentry, things like that. So every topic, you kind of every week, every month when you have a fellowship week, you dive into a different topic and get to hear from experts, and they're super open to questions. And it definitely helped kind of broaden the perspective of just from what I was working on in my office to understanding kind of the priorities of the judicial branch as a whole and how different counties, different courthouses, different court cultures can influence the way priorities and programs are implemented. And it looks like in the chat we see we're mostly going back to in-person activities, seminars, orientation, which is super amazing. The couple in-person activities we had were definitely the highlights of the fellowship for me. So that's great to hear.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Okay, so now we have the Executive Fellowship Program. Junius will be speaking in regards to the Executive Fellowship Program.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junius Baree, and I was an executive fellow from 2019 to 2020. So I was part of the pandemic class, if you will. The first few months of our fellowship, we were in person, and in March 2020, that was transitioned over to remote. But I guess I can start with just a little bit of my background. I'm originally from San Diego, California. I spent some time in the Central Valley. I was also raised in New York City. And so being in these different locations and volunteering with different grassroots programs is what instilled my sense of public service. And I eventually obtained my degree in public policy and administration from Cal State Bakersfield, went back to San Diego, and I had learned about the fellowship program. It was really by accident. I just randomly saw a flyer one day and I said, oh, this looks pretty interesting. And so I applied and got in. And so moved to Sacramento in October 2019. Let's see, the first, and I was selected as one out of 18 executive fellows. The first month was pretty much just orientation and going around visiting different agencies and departments. We were able to meet the executive staff that led those departments, agencies, and entities, and just getting to learn what they do, the various operations, and the backgrounds of the staff and how they got there. And learning, how the executive branch implements policy, which is something I've always been intrigued in, all the nerdy behind the scenes policy stuff. In, let's see, November, we began our interviews with the agencies that we chose that we felt that we were interested in. I think I interviewed with 18 agency and departments. And I eventually was matched with my first choice, the California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, also known as BCSH. And so during my time there, I honestly, it's an experience that I'll never forget. I felt like I was a part of the executive team there. My mentor at the time was the Deputy Secretary for Housing and Consumer Services, Lynn Von Koch-Labert. She's now the Executive Director of the Strategic Growth Council. But now, looking back, those early days, it was filled with a lot of information because here's this relatively, well, it was a small executive team, but large agency that oversees 12 different departments and boards and commissions. And, they're sticking their hand in housing, they're sticking their hand in consumer services and business protection, even horse racing, which is interesting. And so seeing how they're able to manage all that and being able to work in a policy area of my number one interest, which is housing and homelessness, was something that was very vital to my own professional development. And a typical day was, I would clock in at 8:30, 9 o'clock. And yeah, we would have a staff meeting on Mondays, and I would give a report on what projects I was doing. Lynn gave me a lot of autonomy in many of the assignments and projects that I was working on, particularly the Outsmart disaster campaign, coordinating with another fellow from the State Transportation Agency, another executive fellow, coordinating the governor's housing and transportation work group. And so bringing that information back to the staff meeting and updating them periodically. It pretty much, the day was filled with, you felt like you were just as part of the executive team as anyone else. I didn't feel like I was, a fellow, but I used the fellow card very well. I picked up my, roundabout of free coffees and met with different people within the departments that the agency oversaw. And just kind of learned what they did and, what their position was and how they were adding to the overarching goal of what BCSH's mission is. That all kind of changed, I want to say, when COVID began, because now it's remote and everything shifted from all these long-term range projects to now immediate housing assistance, rental assistance and whatnot. And so I was able to see how the executive branch operates in emergency mode, which is very, very critical. And, there were times where one day we're working on one thing, rental assistance, next day, it's now, how do we communicate that to the most vulnerable groups out there who need this information, just going back and forth. And that was very interesting. And I was still given that level of autonomy while still feeling included. I eventually, after I completed the fellowship, I stayed within the agency family. I'm now a member of the Fair Housing Unit and an honorary member of the Tribal Affairs team at HCD, which is overseen by BCSH. My favorite thing about the fellowship, I would say, is one, I really enjoyed working with another executive fellow on a lot of the cross-cutting policy topics. In the executive branch, it's very common for, well, I won't say very common, but for certain agencies, it's common to work together on areas that are intersecting. Housing intersects with transportation and environment. So I met folks at CARB, I met folks at OPR and SGC, and just kind of seeing how all those different policy areas come together when it comes to solving the housing crisis. And two, also, I would say the level of autonomy and trust. This is a high level that fellows are placed at. And so being able to be pushed out, I guess, in the water and being able to learn how to represent the agency and be creative in a lot of the incentives that I was working on some of the projects that was given was amazing, but also the mentorship. Even though Lynn was my main mentor, pretty much I had meetings with the secretary and she gave me advice and mentorship. The undersecretary was like my number 2 mentor. Each one played a role in my very roundabout of experience there. So I guess I'll stop there. I hope I touched on a different on everything.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. I have a question in regards to the different placement opportunities. Do you remember other offices that you could have been placed with? You said there was 18 different interviews that you would do for the placement. What kind of setting was it? Like, did you have to do this over a 2-week period? Was it in a day? How did the placement work for the Executive Fellows programs?
Yes. I believe it was it's been a while. I believe it was a week or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And we had I think on average, maybe I think as much as we could schedule, but 4 to 5 interviews per day. Some of the other agencies and departments I interviewed with were Department of Finance. I interviewed with Strategic Growth Council. Let's see, what else? I believe let's see. Oh, it's been a while. Yes, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And oh gosh, it's been such a long time. But yes, BCSH was my #1 choice, and I was just so lucky to be matched with them. But I do remember that interview stage where it was interesting because I was on one of the Lime scooters and I had a suit on and I was going from interview to interview to interview. And so most of the exec fellows will tell you, oh gosh, you're burnt out after interviewing with that many folks in one day. But it was really cool because, I mean, what other experience do you get, in life, being able to meet with the executive team of so many different agencies and just getting to know what they do and them garnering interest in you as a learning fellow. So that was very fundamental.
What a rewarding experience too. You got to be placed with your #1 choice. That doesn't come out often. It's like from 1 to 3, but the #1 is like a rare moment. So congratulations with that. Okay, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and look at the other parts of this presentation. We touched a little bit on orientation. There is 6 weeks orientation. Is there anything that stood out during the orientation time for any of our alum?
I guess I'll just jump in here quickly. One thing that stood out to the orientation was just at least for me, I felt immediately comfortable because you're around like-minded individuals who all have a general passion for policy and public service. And so, of course, the first day was a little bit nerve-wracking, but the adjustment period wasn't as difficult as I had presumed it to be. The fellowship coordinators were, especially Brian, was very hands-on in making sure we felt comfortable and that questions were answered, and just the sheer interest in assistance that everyone played into our kind of matriculation into the program. Truly, I can't be any more grateful.
Right. Thank you, Janice.
Yeah, I think for me, something that was ingrained very early on from our program director, Amber, and then also once I joined the office too with my team, is that no matter how much, and this is comforting and a little bit scary, no matter how much you prepare beforehand, like you're not going to fully, this is really a learning, you learn on the job and you learn once you start in your office. And I think there's a sense of comfort to know that you're never going to know everything, and that's completely okay. And I think it's even better when you have those moments when you're like, I really don't know what's going on. And I still don't fully know what this means. And I feel like that was very much ingrained with us during our orientation, that it's okay to not know everything, but that's why we're here and that's why we're learning, and we're taking the time to really try to see how we can prepare best beforehand, but understanding that a lot of it isn't going to click until you start in your office and until you start on your first day and you're like, oh, that's what we were talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago. That's what this meant. And so you'll start seeing that the things that the foundation that you built in orientation, once you start in your office, you'll be like, okay, that clicked, or okay, then this from 3 weeks ago clicked, and then this clicked and that clicked. And I think for me, the best moments were like looking back after and being like, wow, I was way more prepared than I thought I was going to be. And at the same time, still had so many other questions and still so many new experiences. But it really does set that foundation for you. And there is that level of comfort. And being with a group of people that, like previous speakers said, are like-minded as you, and are all very like engaged and interested in this world and interested in helping communities and like making change. And so I think that that's a really good sense of like friendship, camaraderie, and like understanding between the people in your cohort, and also just like outside of that. And orientation helps guide you into that and helps you start that mindset.
Great. Thank you, Cassandra. Okay. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get to the end of our presentation with the most important part, which is when and where to apply for the Capital Fellows programs. For our upcoming cohort of 23-24, the deadline is February 6th by 5 p.m. And you can apply at csus.edu/capitalfellows. You can also follow us on social media. We have a Twitter account, Facebook account, and Instagram account. If there's any follow-up questions after this event, you can also email us at the Center for California Studies, which is calstudies@csus.edu. And we'll open up if there's any questions from participants. I see that there was a lot of questions in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for answering the questions as they were coming in. Okay, let's see.
Hello. Is it okay if I just ask
Hi,
a
Ryan.
question aloud?
Yes.
So I was just curious. I know that it was mentioned that you can apply to more than one program, or all if you want to. I was just curious what the pros and cons were to applying to more than one. If it's encouraged, discouraged, if based off your interests, if you want to apply to more than one, or if there's any drawbacks to that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and direct this question to Jamie. He is one of our directors, and he gets to see all of the applications as they come in. So yes, there's pros and cons to applying to all of them, and I'll let Jamie answer that question. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. I think you're probably asking the question for a lot of people, right? Who have wondered the same thing. It's, you're invited to really follow your heart through this process. And I think the main thing that I should leave you with is just be very aware of what the prompts are for each program and what the directors are asking you to, the questions that they're asking you to answer, right? And just answer the questions and focus your answers and think about the branch of government that you see yourself in and put yourself in that position in a sense. And so for myself, I am looking for people that are going to answer those questions entirely and will be comfortable in a legislative environment where, you're in this one hub, there's a lot of activity, you are going to be very focused on changing the code section and, you want to be in the legislative branch. But when I see, someone who has applied to my program that has applied to other programs, that's not a drawback. I just, want to see in their application for me that they've thought about the legislature or the Senate in particular. So, yeah, that as Senate director, I can answer that. I won't speak for the other directors, but I do think that they are very, very, very focused in on their particular branch, as am I. And when we ask you to answer a question in the prompts, really kind of think about us when you do so.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And I can just jump in from the applicant side. I applied to all 4 programs. I was very undecided what I wanted to do out of undergrad. Judicial Fellowship was my first choice, and based on what I was accepted to, I think that probably came across in my applications. And when there were interviews for all 4 programs, it was a super busy month and very stressful. So just keep that in mind too, in terms of like, if you want to apply to all of them, start your applications early because they do have distinct questions and distinct things that you're going to want to think about. So just be mindful too, and be mindful that your interest and what you're genuinely excited about will probably come across in your application and the interview process. And, don't stress yourself out too much by taking too much on if it's not what you're super excited about. But it's doable. It's possible. It can happen.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay and Jamie.
I think Gilberto had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So I was wondering what should be the length for the personal statement and the policy statement?
You will see on the prompts, we give you instructions. So we'll say 1 page, 2 page, whatever it is. So it will be, check out our website, look for the application instructions as well. And that will be really available once the application window opens up. You'll see that.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, okay. That's the reason why I couldn't find it. The window is not open yet. Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you. Alex?
Alex?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and for our host hosting this opportunity. I wanted to ask a question to the fellow alumni. What was your experience outside of the fellowship, just being in Sacramento or being in the town of your placement, like outside of work hours, what was that experience like?
I can start with that one. I actually lived really close to the Capitol. I got a little apartment in Midtown. So I was about a 15-minute walk from work. And overall, I really enjoyed living in Midtown. It's called the City of Trees for a reason. There's trees everywhere. There's a lot of things to do. Whether you go to the downtown Commons area, you go see a Kings game, there's the old Sacramento waterfront. You know, there's just lots of things to do in that area. It's a very social space. People come from outside of Sacramento to downtown to be there. And so, you know, you'll tend to find that the Capitol community is also spread throughout Midtown. So it has a lot of a small town energy to it. I've heard that it's equated to a small city. So coming from a rural area, I thought it was a great blend of both urban and downtown, Midtown. I don't know how to describe Midtown. It's like there's apartments, there's houses. It's very quaint grid. So lots to do.
I'll also jump in, I know this is different for all 4 of the programs, but at least the Judicial Fellow program, our seminar was, and I think this is true of most of the seminars, are substantial amount of work. So there was kind of a consideration of, okay, work's over, I gotta do some reading, I gotta work on my capstone project. So something to be mindful. I mean, I think I got a lot out of it, and I'm grateful, and I wanted that kind of academic side, but it definitely is something you have to work on, kind of that work-life balance, making sure you're finding time moving to a new city, meeting people, getting out of the fellowship mindset for a little bit. But definitely something to consider is that you will have some, you know, after work requirements, and it's a graduate level class, so it's graduate level amounts of reading, but definitely doable, definitely manageable, and we all got a lot out of it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
I guess I'll
Okay,
jump in.
Valerie?
Oh,
Oh, go ahead, Junior.
no, I was just
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Junior.
it was a little bit different for me because I didn't live in Midtown. I lived and still live in North Natomas. So before the transition to remote work, I would commute. It wasn't really a far commute, roughly about 12, 13 or so minutes. I think the worst thing was finding parking downtown. So it probably would have been easier had I lived in Midtown, like I think the majority of the fellows. But outside of the fellowship, you know, I would, you know, hang with fellow friends on the weekends, and we'll grab food, and also a time to decompress, you know, because there are times when, you know, the workload does get, it can become overwhelming, or you just would need some time to, you know, time away from it. And so we would find different eatery spots. Sacramento is big on brunch. And so having those brunch friend dates and whatnot helped to, you know, especially if you like me, who I love to eat, was very fun. And, you know, for coming from San Diego, which is a relatively large city, Sacramento, I think was perfectly described before. It's a perfect blend of like a small town feel, but definitely a growing downtown atmosphere. So honestly, I can't complain too much about it.
Thank you so much, Janice.
Thank you. Go ahead, Valerie.
Hi, everyone. My question is also for the alumni. Do you all have any tips for finding housing, or how soon should we start looking for housing, or is there any affordable housing you guys know of?
Jamie, don't you have a list of fellows posting boards of how you house together and stuff?
Correct. There is we provide a housing board database that we post for outgoing fellows to update and provide bulletin board information about kind of available housing within the population of the Senate fellows, Assembly fellows, executive and judicial can all tap in as well. And to answer and that can be very helpful, right? When you are maybe a former fellow and you want to keep your housing and your roommate is moving on, heck, you might even be able to move in with someone who's already gone through and has a year experience, and that can have a benefit. Or you can link up with a fellow from your class in that forum and find a roommate. And those can be great relationships, and that can last a lifetime from there. Always the hope. And there's those options. I know that CFAA, the Fellows Alumni Association, is a great resource as well, because it's sort of a common space of former fellows who share information. And if someone's looking for housing, they'll let folks know. If you participate in that, you may become part of a staff association and connect with people once you're in the program. Oh, I guess you're already in the program at that point. I'm sorry. But Fellows Alumni Association is something you might want to sort of listen in on prior to the start of the program. And then I would just begin about 6 months, or, once you get into the program, and, we let you know in May, begin your hunt, but actively really have something set up in the fall by September, I would say, or October.
I was going to say, adding on to that, Jamie, definitely reach out to anyone who's a part of the Capital community, ask where they live, how they found their housing, what platform they used. Essentially, start looking early so you get a good idea of what's there. I would definitely say it's affordable to live in a studio, but you will definitely need a roommate if you're looking for a 2-bedroom or 1-bed. It's expensive because you're in Midtown, so keep that in mind. But I would say about $1,000 a month is what you should be budgeting for, at least from my experience of living in the downtown area. I found my unit by going on Google Maps and calling and saying, "Hi, do you have a unit available?" And you just have to be really proactive when it comes. It's kind of aggressive, so just be prepared.
Great, thank you so much. Taking into consideration everyone's time, if there isn't any other questions, we have reached the end of this information session. Thank you, everybody, for your interest. Looking forward to seeing your applications this upcoming season. Our applications will be open October, the first week of October, so keep an eye out for them. And the earlier you start working on your application, the better it will be. Okay, thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Have a beautiful day.
Are we staying on, Nadia?
Yes, I'll stop recording.
Sorry, I don't want to keep you guys too long. If you have,
Oh, go ahead.
I just had one more question. I think it would be directed towards you. I was just wondering, aside from the program requirements, what is like one thing that stands out across all applicants that give them the edge when applying to the program, at least for those who are accepted into the fellowship, be it previous experience in an internship or job, or a specific degree, and so on?
I would say be you whenever you're writing your personal statement. The committee wants to get to learn who you are, how well you will adjust in the setting that you're applying for. So be you, be sincere, let us know about your interests, any extracurricular activities. There will be a resume that you have to submit. So there's certain things that you have to submit. Make sure that your application is complete. Have someone review, proofread your writing before you submit it. Just touch on all the points. Make sure that you have a good application. That's what stands out. Anything else that you would like to add, Jamie?
I think that was perfectly said, Nadia. You're right, spot on. I would just simply add, make sure Your reference letters are, that they show that maybe you put the time in with your professor early to where it's not a rushed letter, and that professor knows you to some degree. Sometimes that means, you'll have to sort of meet with that professor early and often to make sure that gets done in the appropriate amount of time, but that we really look at those things, right? Who's referring you and why, and what do they know about you? That's kind of important for me.
Definitely. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll let you guys go. I really appreciate everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ryan. Take care. Bye-bye.